The mafia boss got a call from the hospital. She's fighting for life and keeps saying your name. The scent of stale cigar smoke and old leather always calms me. It's the scent of my office, my fortress, a place where the world outside pauses at the reinforced door. I was 38 years old, and for half of those years, I had run the Moretti family. I had built an empire of silence, respect, and carefully managed violence. The city moved to my rhythm, and I made damn sure the rhythm was steady. That night, the rhythm broke. It was late, past 10 o'clock, and I was staring at a ledger detailing shipping manifests from the Red Hook docks. My consigliere, Ray, was across from me, sipping an espresso. The only sound was the scratch of my pen and the soft clink of his cup. Then my private line rang. Not my cell, not the business line, the private one, the one reserved for emergencies within the family. I snatched it up. What? Is this Mr. Dominic Moretti? The voice was female, hesitant, smelling of antiseptic and fear. I leaned forward, my voice dropped. Who is this? My name is Nurse Riley. I'm calling from St. Aurelia Memorial Hospital. We have a patient who was brought in, a Jane Doe, hit and run. She's in critical condition. Sir, she's unconscious, but she keeps repeating your name, Dominic. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my gut. It was a trap. It had to be. A new play by the Cervalos. Or maybe that cartel trash. La Colina, trying to get me to show my face. You have the wrong number. I was about to hang up, to have the line traced and the hospital watched, when she spoke again, rushing her words. We found a name on a work ID in her pocket. Camilla Rose. Does that mean anything to you, please? She's fading. The doctors think... They think hearing a familiar voice. Camilla Rose. The name hit me like a ghost. It wasn't a name tied to my business. It wasn't family. It was the diner. I saw her instantly. Big, haunted eyes, dark hair pulled back in a messy knot, a cheap blue apron, a stubborn chin. I know the name, I said, my voice flat. I'll be there. I hung up, cutting off the nurse's relieved sigh. Ray set his cup down. His face, usually a mask of calm calculation, was tight. Dom, what is it? A hospital, a woman. She's asking for me. A trap. He said it flat, a statement of fact. The Cervalos have been too quiet. This stinks of them. You can't go... Her name is Camilla Rose. Ray frowned, searching his mental database. The name means nothing to me. A prostitute, an associate... The waitress, I said, from Sal's, months ago. The memory was sharp, annoying. I hadn't thought of it since I was in Queens, checking on some properties and stopped for coffee at Sal's, an old place my father used to frequent. I was sitting in a back booth when I heard the trouble. It was Gianni Russo, a low-level parasite, not even a real associate, just a maggot who used the Moretti name to shake down waitresses and bodega owners. He was leaning over the counter, his voice a greasy whisper that carried across the linoleum. Look, sweetheart, he was saying to the girl, Camilla, it's simple. You pay the protection fee, just $200 a week, and I make sure nobody bothers you. I make sure you get home safe. I told you, she said. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. I don't have $200. I barely made $50 today. Please, just leave me alone. Leave you alone? He laughed. A wet, ugly sound. He grabbed her wrist, hard. That's not how this works. You're in Moretti territory. You pay the tax. That's when I stood up. The diner went silent. Gianni's back was to me. I walked over, slowly, the sound of my shoes on the tile the only noise. Gianni, I said... He froze. He turned, and the color drained from his face. He looked like he'd seen the devil. In his world. He had... Mr. Moretti, he stammered, letting go of her arm. I was just... collecting. You were just what? I kept my voice quiet. Quiet is always worse. You were collecting for me. You work for me now. Gianni? No, sir, I just meant... You meant to use my family's name to steal tips from a waitress? I stepped closer. until I was looking down at him. "You are an embarrassment. You will give her back every dollar you've ever taken from her. Then you will get out of this borough. If I see your face in Queens again, I will have my men peel it from your skull." He was shaking, sweating. "Yes, Mr. Moretti, I'm sorry. He threw a wad of cash on the counter and practically ran out the door. I turned to the girl, Camilla. She was rubbing her wrist, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and something else, defiance. She was terrified, but she wasn't broken. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know how. He won't bother you again," I said. It was a dismissal. I threw a $100 bill on the counter for my coffee and walked out. I hadn't seen her since, but I hadn't forgotten. I'd had Ray look into her, found out she was drowning in debt, mostly from an old hospital bill, found out Gianni had been bleeding her for months. I had Ray anonymously cover her back rent, 3 months' worth. I didn't do it to be kind. I did it to settle the account. My name was used. A debt was created. I paid it. End of story. Until now. "Dom, it's a trap," Ray insisted, pulling me back to the present. "They found her. They know you helped her. They're using her as bait." "Maybe," I said, grabbing my coat. It was a black cashmere topcoat, heavy armor against the November chill. Or maybe she's just a girl who got hit by a car, and my name is the only one she could think of. That's a risk we don't take. I'm taking it. I checked the .38 caliber handgun in its holster under my arm. A habit. "Stay here. Lock this place down. If you don't hear from me in 1 hour, send the crew, not to the hospital, to the Cervalo's front door." "Dominic." Ray's voice was a plea. He was the only man alive who could use my first name like that. Alone? It's suicide. "It's a hospital," I said, opening the office door. "No one's that stupid." I was lying. Everyone was that stupid. But I didn't take my men. If it was a trap, a crew would mean a war. If it wasn't, I didn't want my men seeing me at a hospital for a waitress. It was a weakness. I went alone. The drive to St. Aurelia's was fast. The streets were dark, slick with a cold rain. My mind was racing. Why my name? Not Mr. Moretti. The name she'd heard in the diner. Dominic. The nurse had been clear, like she knew me. I parked the Bentley half a block away, in the shadows. I watched the hospital entrance for 10 minutes. No black sedans, no familiar faces among the smokers huddled by the door. Just tired nurses and worried-looking civilians. I walked in, my hands in my pockets, my coat buttoned. The lobby smelled of bleach and burnt coffee. I found the ICU on the 3rd floor. A nurse looked up from a desk. It was the voice from the phone. "Mr. Moretti?" I nodded. "She's in here. Dr. Evans just finished. It's not good. Severe internal trauma. Multiple fractures. Her pressure is unstable." She led me through a set of double doors into a dark bay, sectioned off by curtains. She pulled back the last one, and I saw her. The image from the diner shattered. This wasn't a defiant girl in an apron. This was a body. She was pale, a ghostly white under the fluorescent lights. A thick tube was taped to her mouth, breathing for her. A dark, ugly bruise covered the left side of her face, swelling her eye shut. Wires snaked from her arms and chest to a bank of machines that beeped in a slow, steady rhythm. This was not a trap. This was a slaughter. Something thick and hot rose in my throat. It wasn't pity. I'd seen worse. I'd caused worse. This was something else. A deep, personal ache. Guilt. I had saved her from Gianni, only to leave her exposed to something 1,000 times worse. I moved to the bedside, my coat brushing the steel rail. She looked impossibly small in the bed. "Why my name?" I asked the nurse, my voice a low growl. "We don't know," she whispered, her eyes on the monitors. "She's been in and out of consciousness since the ambulance brought her in. Every time she surfaces, she gets agitated. She murmurs, 'Dominic, tell Dominic. He has to,' and then she's gone again." She was trying to warn me. The thought hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about her. This was about me. She was a message. Who found her? A taxi driver saw her in the road, said a dark-colored SUV sped off. He's the one who called 911. I looked at Camilla, at the bruised line of her jaw, the scrapes on her knuckles. She'd fought. I want private security, I said. The nurse blinked. Sir, the hospital is secure to... Not secure enough. I pulled out my cell. I made one call to Vico, my top enforcer, St. Aurelia's, 3rd floor, ICU. Patient is Camila Rose. I want 2 men on this floor, scrubs or orderly uniforms. I don't care. 2 in the lobby, a car watching the street. Nobody gets near this room unless I clear them. Not doctors, not nurses, nobody. You put your own man at this door, now. I hung up. The nurse was pale, but she wasn't stupid. She knew who I was. In this part of the city, everyone did. She's a material witness, I said, giving her an out. The police will want to talk to her. Of course, she said, nodding too quickly. I'll update her chart. She fled. I was alone with her. The only sound was the hiss of the ventilator and the steady, too slow beep of the heart monitor. I reached out, my fingers brushing a strand of dark hair off her forehead. Her skin was cold. This girl, who I'd met for maybe 3 minutes, had been hunted, and in her last conscious moments, she was trying to get to me. I called Ray. Dig, I said, my voice low. Camilla Rose, the waitress from Sal's. I want everything, where she lives, who her friends are, where she's been for the last 6 months, and I want to know who was tossing her apartment. Apartment? Dom, what's going on? Someone broke into her place. Then someone ran her over and left her for dead. She's here, at St. Aurelia's, tubed up and unconscious. This is connected. Ray, find the thread. You're still there, he hissed. Get out. Vico's men are 10 minutes out, but... Find the thread, I repeated, and hung up. I pulled the room's single, uncomfortable visitor's chair to the side of the bed, and I waited. I watched the rise and fall of her chest, timed by the machine. I watched the numbers on the screen. I was good at waiting. My entire life was built on patience, waiting for the right moment to strike, the right moment to collect, the right moment to fold. But this was a different kind of waiting. This was helpless. And I hated it. An hour passed. Vico's men were in place. One stood outside her curtain, a mountain in blue scrubs. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease, but the knot in my gut remained. My phone vibrated. Ray. It's weird. Dom, he said, his voice quiet. She's clean. No family, no known associates. Social Security number was issued when she was 18. Before that, it's like she didn't exist. Foster kid, I murmured. It made sense, the toughness, the shadows in her eyes. Probably, but get this. She quit Sal's 2 weeks ago. No notice. Just gone. Her landlord? He's the one who reported the break-in. Found the door kicked in yesterday morning. The place was wrecked. Not vandalism. Someone was looking for something specific. Tearing up floorboards, cutting open the mattress. And her? No one's seen her since she quit. She paid her rent in cash, 2 days before. She was running. I said, she got spooked, quit her job, and someone caught up with her. What about the location? Her apartment? Astoria. Just on the edge of the territory La Colina is trying to claim. It's a war zone over there. Dom, the Cervalos are trying to hold it, but the cartel is pushing hard. It's messy. So she's caught in the middle. Or she saw something, Ray said. She saw them, or they think she did. Dom, this girl is a civilian, a ghost, you being there. It paints a target on your back and hers. If La Colina thinks she's important to you, she is important to me. I growled, surprising myself with the force of it. She was trying to warn me, Ray. That makes her my business. This is a mistake, boss. Find out who ran her down. I want a name by sunrise. I hung up and looked back at her. A ghost. No family, no friends. Just a kicked-in door and a desperate attempt to reach a man she didn't even know. A man who'd scared off a thug for her once. I sat there for another hour, maybe 2. The hospital settled into the deep night silence. The beeping of the monitor was the only sound. It was lulling. I must have closed my eyes. A sound? A small, rasping breath? My head snapped up. Her eyes were closed, but her brow was furrowed. Her head moved, just slightly, on the pillow. She was fighting the ventilator, a small, choking sound coming from her. I was on my feet, leaning over the bed. Camilla? Her eyelids fluttered. She looked like she was in a nightmare, trapped. "Dominic," she whispered. It was just a puff of air, but I heard it, clear as a gunshot. It wasn't a warning. It was a plea. Without thinking, my hand covered hers. Her fingers were cold, limp. I wrapped my hand around hers, my thumb pressing into her palm. "I'm here," I said. My voice was rough, unfamiliar. "It's okay, I'm here." I don't know who I was talking to, her or myself. This primal pull? It was tightening in my chest. This wasn't a debt. This wasn't business. This was mine. Her fingers twitched in my grip, a tiny, faint pressure. And then, all at once, her body went rigid, a single, violent jolt. The monitor beside me erupted, a long, piercing, solid tone. The green line on the screen went flat. The curtain was ripped back. "Code Blue, get him out of here!" It was the nurse, Riley. Her face a mask of panic. A doctor and 2 other nurses charged in, pushing a crash cart. "She was just—" I started, but they were already shoving me. "Sir, you have to leave, now!" They tore her gown open. "Paddles charging!" "Camilla!" I roared her name, a desperate, useless sound. One of the nurses shoved me, hard, into the hallway. The door slammed shut. I was left standing in the empty, sterile corridor, staring at the closed door, the flatline tone of the monitor muffled but still audible, still screaming. The beep of the heart monitor was a metronome counting seconds in a vacuum. Dominic Rossi had not moved from the stiff, unforgiving visitor's chair in over 4 hours. The smell of antiseptic and floor wax burned his nostrils, a stark contrast to the iron-laced scent of rain and blood that had clung to her. Camilla. She had survived. The paddles. The frantic stabilization in the emergency room. The doctor. A weary woman with compassion fatigue etched around her eyes, had used terms like transient cardiac shock and severe contusion from the impact. She was lucky. She was also, they explained, in a medically induced coma to let the dangerous swelling in her brain subside. He should not be here. He had a dozen other pressing concerns. Marco was handling the cleanup of the warehouse disaster. Silas was tracking the supply chain breach that had cost him millions, and he, Dominic, was sitting vigil for a woman who was, by all accounts, a tactical liability, a civilian who had seen too much. Yet he stayed. He found himself watching the steady, machine-assisted rise and fall of her chest beneath the thin white blanket. The light from the hallway cut a sharp, sterile rectangle across the floor, illuminating the IV stand, the bag of saline dripping with rhythmic, indifferent precision. He studied the details of her face, now cleared of the rain and grime, the sharp line of her jaw, the slight cleft in her chin, the dark sweep of her eyelashes against her pale cheek. There was a profound vulnerability there, that the fire in her eyes, the raw defiance he had seen just hours ago, had masked completely. He felt an unwelcome pull, a resonance he had not experienced in years. It was the pull of an enigma, a puzzle he felt a sudden, sharp need to solve. He was pulled from his reverie by a nurse, clipboard in hand, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "Mr. Rossi?" she asked, her voice hushed by the late hour. He stood, the movement stiff, his bones aching from the chair. "Just Dominic. Any change?" "She's stable, which is what we want." The nurse, Linda, according to her tag, offered a tired, professional smile. "We're trying to process her admission, but we're hitting a wall. We need an emergency contact, family, a friend, anyone we can notify." Dominic scrubbed a hand over his face, the rasp of his stubble loud in the quiet room. "I don't know any—" We aren't close. I just found her. Right. Linda's smile tightened. She had clearly heard that one before. Well, the name she gave triage, Camila Ortega, isn't pulling up any local records, no insurance, no driver's license match, no medical history. And the address she gave doesn't exist. For official purposes, she's a Jane Doe. Dominic frowned, a cold flicker of unease starting in his gut. That's impossible. Check again. We have, sir, 3 times. We ran the prints she gave the police when she filed the report on the accident. Nothing. No warrants, but also no anything. It's like she doesn't exist in the system. As far as the state is concerned, this woman was born today. The nurse left, leaving the silence of the room to press in on him. A ghost, a woman with no past, no connections, no footprint. The enigma deepened, twisting the simple knot of responsibility in his gut into something sharper, something almost personal. He looked back at Camilla, at the blank slate in the hospital bed. Who the hell was she? The system. Camilla knew the system. She knew the chemical smell of bleach in hallways that were never truly clean. She knew the sound of a case manager's keyboard, the hollow click-clack that decided where you slept, what you ate, and who you were forced to call family for the next 6 months. She was 16, sitting in a gray cubicle, the walls covered in faded informational posters about nutrition and career choices. The foster care system had been her life since her mother vanished when she was 9. 9 years of being a file, a number, a case. Camilla, Mrs., Petrov said, not looking up from her screen, her glasses perched on her nose. The Hendersons have agreed to a trial placement. Camilla's stomach clenched, a cold, familiar dread creeping up her spine. The Hendersons. Rumor in the group home was that Mr. Henderson liked the girls who were quiet, the ones who were too scared to speak up. I'll be 18 in 22 months, Camilla said, her voice quiet but rigid, a small rebellion. I can emancipate. And do what, Mrs.? Petrov finally looked up, her gaze flat and overworked. Live on the street? You have potential, Camilla, but you're high risk. You're defiant. This is your last chance before a group facility. Camilla looked at the poster behind the woman's head. It showed a smiling cartoon chef holding a whisk. She made a choice. That night, she packed the $47 she had saved from a fast food job she had held for 3 weeks, a change of clothes, and the single worn photograph of her mother she kept hidden in her shoe. She slipped out the squeaking window of the group home at 2 a.m. and never looked back. She became a ghost by necessity. She learned to wash dishes for cash, to sleep on buses, to use library computers to study for her GED. She built a new identity, one piece at a time, always using cash, always staying off the grid, always moving. She was meticulous. She was disciplined. She was terrified. Because she was not just running from the system. She was running from the man who had caused her mother to vanish, the man whose face she saw in her nightmares, the man she knew would one day come looking for the last living witness to his crimes. She had built a life, a quiet one, working as a freelance bookkeeper for small businesses that paid in cash, moving apartments every year. She had survived, until now, until she had seen him, the man from her nightmares, standing in the shadows of a warehouse, shaking hands with Dominic Rossi. Dominic's phone vibrated, a welcome distraction, a text from Shift, his tech specialist, a digital ghost who could find anyone. Boss, you were right, she's clean. Too clean. But I found the bank. Dominic stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. He dialed. Talk to me. Shift. It's weird. Shift's voice was fast, punctuated by the clack of a mechanical keyboard. She's practically invisible. No credit, no social media, nothing. But I found a savings account at a small credit union, opened 6 years ago under the name C. Ortega. All deposits are cash, sporadic, until last week. What happened last week? Dominic asked, leaning against the cool wall. She emptied it. $50,000. Cash withdrawal 3 days ago. Dominic's blood ran cold. $50,000, a go bag. She was planning to run. From what? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? She was running from something, or to something. Sir? The nurse. Linda approached him again, her face softer this time, holding a plastic bag. I'm sorry to bother you, but when we were bagging her personal effects for storage, we found this in her coat pocket. It was tucked into the lining, soaked through. She handed him a small, black moleskin notebook, its cover warped and swollen by the rain. Thank you, Dominic said, ending the call with shift. He returned to the dim room, to the chair, to the rhythmic beep. The room felt colder. He opened the notebook. The water had smeared much of the ink, turning neat columns of numbers into blue-gray clouds. It looked like accounting ledgers, budgets, expenses. But the last few pages were different. The handwriting was no longer meticulous. It was rushed, frantic, pressed hard into the paper. Scrawled were names, dates, license plates, shipping codes. And then, circled multiple times, his name, Dominic Rossi. Beneath it, a phone number, his private line, the one that was not listed anywhere, the one only his inner circle and his oldest, most trusted clients knew. A cold dread settled over him, heavy and absolute. This was not a random civilian. This was not an accident. The $50,000, the accounting notes, his name, his private number. She had not stumbled into his war. She had been trying to find him. She had been trying to warn him. He looked at her, lying still and pale, the tubes breathing for her, the feeling of responsibility solidified into something hard and fiercely protective. She had been coming to him for help, and instead, she'd been run down at his gate. Marco. Dominic's voice was low, dangerous, speaking into his phone. Lock down this hospital. I want eyes on every entrance, every floor. Someone tried to kill her. They might try to finish the job. Already on it, boss. Marco's voice was calm, efficient. Silas is in the security room now, looping the feed for this floor. We have 2 men in the lobby and 1 at the emergency room ambulance bay. Good. And get shift digging. I want to know who she was running from. I want to know everything. Dominic hung up and stared at the notebook. Rossi. She knew his name. How? An hour passed, then 2. The rhythmic beep was the only sound. He must have dozed. His head tipped back against the wall because he was startled awake by his phone vibrating violently in his hand. A text from Marco. Got one. 4th floor. Nurse's station. Didn't look right. Playing orderly. Dominic was moving before he had even finished reading. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his fatigue vanishing, replaced by cold adrenaline. He emerged on the 4th floor. He saw them instantly. At the far end of the corridor, by the elevators. Marco and Silas had a man pinned against the wall. He was small, wiry, and drowning in hospital scrubs that were 2 sizes too large. He was asking about the Jane Doe from the hit and run, Silas said, his voice a low rumble. Silas was a mountain of a man, and his presence alone was enough to make the snooper tremble, his face pale and slick with sweat. I'm just an orderly, the man stammered, his eyes wide with fear, darting between the 2 men. New orderly? Marco asked, holding up a stolen ID badge. Funny, this guy's on vacation in Maui. Try again. Dominic stepped in front of the man, blocking his view of the elevator, of escape. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Who sent you? The man's gaze darted from Dominic to Silas, then back. He saw no escape, only a cold, indifferent finality. I don't know his name, I swear. Who? Dominic repeated, the word flat and heavy. Sent to you? I just get paid to check, to see if she was gone, that's all. Silas, without a word, applied a fraction of pressure to the man's wrist, bending it back against the joint. A small, sharp crack echoed in the sterile hallway, followed by a choked, high-pitched scream that the man bit back. Okay, the man gasped, tears of pain springing to his eyes. La Colina! It was La Colina! The name hit Dominic like a physical blow. La Colina, the hill, a new, vicious faction that had splintered from the remnants of the old Salazar cartel. They were disorganized, brutal, and trying to muscle into the West Coast shipping routes. His routes. "Why do they want her?" Dominic demanded. "I don't know, I swear. They just said she was a loose end, a bookkeeper. Said she saw something she shouldn't have. Please, man, I'm just a runner." A bookkeeper, the accounting notes in her journal. It clicked, the supply chain breach, the missing inventory, the ambush at the warehouse. It was not a rival. It was an inside job, and La Colina was behind it. This girl, this ghost, held the key to it all. "Silas," Dominic said, his voice cold as ice. "Take him downstairs, get the name of his contact, convince him it is in his best interest to forget he was ever here, then let him go. He's a message." Silas nodded, dragging the whimpering man toward the stairwell. "Marco," Dominic said, turning to his other man, "they know she's here. Move her, now. I have a private clinic in Brentwood. Get her transferred. Use the service exit. I want a full team on her." "And you, boss?" Marco asked, already keying his phone. "I'm going to send a message back." Dominic's eyes were dark. "La Colina wants to play. Let's play." The intermediary for La Colina was a man named Alvarez. He favored gaudy suits, thick gold chains, and operated out of a high-stakes poker room in the back of a supposedly legitimate import-export business in the industrial district. Dominic did not bother with the front door. Marco and Silas used the alley entrance, disabling the two guards with silent, economical precision. No firearms. Not yet. This was about communication, not escalation, just pressure points and swift. Practice strikes that left the men unconscious but breathing. The poker room was thick with cigar smoke and the heavy smell of expensive whiskey. Alvarez was at the head of the table, laughing at a joke, a pile of chips in front of him. When the door opened, the laughter died instantly. The other players, businessmen and minor criminals, froze. "Dominic," Alvarez said, attempting a smile, though his eyes went cold and watchful. "This is an unexpected pleasure. You're not on the guest list." "I'm updating it," Dominic said, walking forward, his steps unhurried. Marco and Silas fanned out, their presence sucking the air from the room, securing the exits. "This is a private game," Alvarez said, pushing his chair back, his hand inching toward the inside of his jacket. "And this is a private conversation," Dominic replied. He moved faster than Alvarez could react, faster than anyone expected. He seized the man's wrist, twisting it sharply. There was a sickening snap of bone. Alvarez roared, his other hand coming up with a small, silver-plated pistol. Silas was already there, bringing the butt of his own weapon down on Alvarez's forearm, a single, brutal strike that sent the gun skittering across the green felt table. The room erupted. Two of Alvarez's bodyguards, stationed against the back wall, drew their weapons. The ensuing fight was brutal, fast, and remarkably quiet. It was not a shootout, it was a statement. Marco moved like a dancer, disarming one guard and using him as a shield against the other, his movements fluid and devastating. Silas was the opposite, a force of nature, a hammer blow that broke through defenses with pure, immovable strength. Dominic focused on Alvarez. He slammed the man back into his chair, the wood groaning in protest. "The girl in the hospital!" Dominic's voice was a low growl, barely audible over the grunts and crashes in the room. "She's mine." "I don't know what you're talking about," Alvarez spat, blood trickling from his lip. Dominic picked up a heavy crystal ashtray from the table and brought it down on the man's uninjured hand, the one resting on the arm of the chair. The sound of shattering glass and crushed fingers was sickening, sharp and wet. Alvarez screamed, a high, thin sound of agony. "She is mine," Dominic repeated, leaning in close, his face inches from the terrified, sweating intermediary. "You sent a man to finish the job. You failed. You tried to ambush my shipment. You failed." He picked up a single, high-value poker chip from the table. "This is my city. This is my business. You and La Colina are not welcome here. You are not wanted." He pressed the chip hard into the man's shattered, bloody hand, forcing his ruined fingers to close around it. Alvarez howled, his body convulsing. That's my final buy-in, Dominic said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Tell your boss, the next time I see any of your people near my territory, near my men, or near her, I will burn La Colina to the ground, starting with you. He straightened his jacket, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. The fight was over. The 2 bodyguards were unconscious. The other players were hiding under the table, praying to be invisible. Let's go, Dominic said. They walked out, leaving the smoke-filled room in chaos, the smell of fear now overpowering the whiskey. The message had been sent. The drive back to the first hospital was tense, the streets dark and empty. Dominic's adrenaline was still thrumming. He had sent the message, but he knew this was only the beginning. He had declared war on a faction known for its unpredictability. His phone buzzed, a text from Marco. Transfer delayed. Her vitals dipped. Doctors are checking her now. We're on standby. He pushed through the hospital doors, his knuckles still aching. He made his way to her room. The guard Marco had posted outside, a new face from his team, nodded at him. He stepped inside. The room was dark, save for the glow of the monitors. And her eyes were open. She was awake. She stared at the ceiling, her gaze unfocused, her breath coming in shallow, pained gasps. A thin tube was still taped to her face, feeding her oxygen. Dominic moved slowly, not wanting to startle her, his footsteps seeming to echo in the space. Camilla? Her head turned, a slow, agonizing movement. Her eyes tried to focus on him. They were clouded with medication and a deep, primal fear. Where? She whispered, her voice a dry, broken rasp. It hurts. Everything hurts. You're at the hospital, he said, his voice softer than he had intended, all the ice from the confrontation with Alvarez melting away. He moved closer, stopping by the bed rail. You were in an accident. She squinted, recognition dawning, and the fear intensified. No, she breathed, her breath hitching. He saw me. Who saw you? The car. It wasn't an accident. She began to tremble, her entire body shaking, and the heart rate monitor picked up its tempo, beeping faster. He tried. Hey. Dominic reached out, his instincts taking over. He placed his hand on her shoulder, his touch firm. You're safe. I've got you. She flinched at his touch, a reflexive, terrified jerk, then settled, her eyes locking on his. Dominic? I'm here. She was searching his face, her gaze frantic, looking for... What? An enemy? An ally? Dom, she whispered. The familiarity of the name struck him, a blow to the chest. No one had called him Dom, not since his brother died, not in 10 years. It's my fault, she whimpered, tears beginning to well and track through the grime on her temples, cutting clean paths. I tried to find you. I tried to warn you. I should have told you. Told me what, Camilla? Told me about La Colina? Her eyes widened in pure terror. You know? I know. They're inside, she choked out, a sob catching in her throat, a sound of profound despair. Your system, your shipping manifests. They're... Shh. He could not help it. He gently brushed the damp hair from her forehead. His touch was hesitant, his calloused fingers rough against her skin, but it seemed to anchor her. It's okay. I'm handling it. You don't need to worry about that now. You just need to rest. She shook her head, a small, pained motion that cost her. He'll kill me. He'll kill you, too. No, he won't, Dominic said with a sudden, fierce certainty that surprised even himself. She lifted her hand, the one without the IV. It was shaking violently. With a tremor of effort, she laid it against his cheek, her palm cold. He froze. Her touch was feather-light, a desperate, fragile connection. He saw the raw, unfiltered terror in her eyes, and beneath it, a profound, soul-deep loneliness that echoed his own. He covered her hand with his, pressing it to his face, then slowly leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. He closed his eyes. The incessant beeping of the monitor, the antiseptic smell, the hard edges of the room, it all faded. There was only the faint warmth of her skin, the shared breath, the silent, desperate understanding that passed between them. They were two ghosts, clinging to each other in the storm. "I should have told you," she whispered again, her tears wet on his hand. "You're going to tell me," he murmured back, his voice rough. "When you're better. I'm not going anywhere." The door opened, breaking the spell. Two nurses and a technician entered, their faces professional and detached, their arrival shattering the intimacy of the moment. "Mr. Rossi, we need to move her to the intensive care unit for closer observation," the lead nurse said. "All business." Dominic straightened up, pulling away from her, though his hand lingered on hers until the last possible second. "I'll be right outside." Camilla's eyes never left his as they unlocked the bed. He watched them wheel her out of the room, her small, trembling hand the last thing he saw before the doors swung shut, leaving him alone in the empty, quiet room. Dominic stood in the hallway for a long moment, the ghost of her touch still tingling on his cheek. The image of her terrified eyes was burned into his mind. She was not just a key. She was not just a liability. She was a woman who had been running for her life, and she had run straight to him. He had sent a message to La Colina, but he knew they would not back down. Not now. He had drawn a line in the sand, and he had placed her squarely behind him. He pulled out his phone and called Marco. "The transfer is off. She's going to the ICU. I want our own guards. 2 on her door, round the clock. No one gets in or out without my personal clearance. Not doctors, not nurses, no one." "Got it, boss." Dominic walked out of the hospital, the early morning air cold and sharp against his face. The sun was just beginning to stain the eastern sky a dull, bruised purple. He needed to get back to his own compound, to lock down his operations, to prepare for the war he had just officially declared. He walked down the parking garage ramp to where he had left his car, a custom, bulletproof sedan that weighed 3 tons. He stopped dead. The car was exactly where he had left it, but the driver's side window, rated to stop a high-caliber round, was shattered. A dense spider web of cracks spreading from a central impact point, the windshield was similarly damaged, ruined. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a single, dead white rose. They had not just returned his message, they had delivered one of their own. They had been here, in the garage, while he was upstairs. They had waited. They had watched him. They knew where he was. They knew he was vulnerable. Dominic looked up at the hospital tower, at the rows of dark windows. She was in there. He was out here. And the war had just followed him home. The white rose was ashes in the parking garage, but its thorns were in Dominic's throat. The hospital was compromised. He had announced his protection of her, and La Colina had announced they could get to him, anywhere, anytime. She was a target, and his proximity was the bullseye. He made the call before his wrecked car was even towed. Within an hour, a private ambulance, flanked by 2 black sedans that looked like government vehicles, pulled into the hospital's secure discharge bay. Marco and Silas oversaw the transfer themselves. Camilla was still groggy, her body a tapestry of aches, her mind clouded with painkillers. She only relaxed when Dominic himself climbed into the back of the ambulance, sitting on the bench opposite her gurney. Where are we going?" she whispered, her eyes fluttering, trying to focus on his face. "Somewhere safe," he said, his voice a low rumble meant to soothe. "A clinic. My clinic. No one can get to you there." She watched him for a long moment, the fear in her eyes warring with a profound, exhausted trust that she seemed to despise. She finally nodded, her hand gripping the thin blanket. "They won't stop, Dom." "Neither will I," he said. The facility was not a hospital. It was a private, high-end care suite on the top floor of a medical building he owned in Brentwood. It was sterile, state-of-the-art, and completely anonymous. The floor was accessible only by a private elevator that required his key card. His men, in suits, stood guard in the outer reception area. It was a fortress designed for one. For the next 2 days, the world shrank to the 4 walls of that room. A private doctor and nurse, both on his payroll for years, managed her care. Dominic slept on the sofa in the attached sitting room, a decision he did not bother to analyze. He told himself it was about security. She was the link to La Colina. But as he sat in the dim light, listening to her breathe, he knew it was a lie. On the 3rd day, the fog of medication finally lifted. She was sitting up in bed, the sheets pulled around her waist, a pale blue robe covering her shoulders. Her ribs were taped, a violent purple bruise stained her jaw, but her eyes were clear. They were sharp, and they were fixed on him. He sat in the chair across from the bed, a cup of untouched coffee on the table beside him. "You feel better," he stated. It was not a question. "I feel present," she said, her voice stronger, though still raspy, "which right now feels terrifying. You sent a message to Alvarez, didn't you?" He raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" "Your knuckles were split," she said simply, nodding toward his left hand. "You've been favoring them. You went after them." She looked at him, and he saw the woman from the warehouse, the one with fire and steel in her spine. "That was a mistake. You don't send messages to La Colina. You just run." "I don't run," he said, the words flat. "They brought this to my door. They put you in this bed. They destroyed my inventory. They have to be answered. Now, you're going to tell me why." She flinched, pulling the robe tighter. "I told you, they're inside your system." "You knew that before you came to me. You knew my name. You had my private number. You were running from them with $50,000 in cash. This isn't just about my shipping manifests. Camila, this is about you. Talk to me." He kept his voice gentle, a stark contrast to the man who had shattered Alvarez's hand. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, forcing himself to be patient, to be the safe harbor she had been seeking. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands, which were twisting the edge of the sheet. I've been running for a long time, over 10 years. From who?" "Everyone," she whispered, "but mostly from them, from La Colina." "Why? What did you do to them?" "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice hardening. "My father did." The story came out in hesitant, broken pieces. Her father, Ricardo Ortega, had not just been a bookkeeper. He had been the bookkeeper for the Salazar cartel, the organization that had fractured and eventually birthed the rabid, violent animal now known as La Colina. Ricardo, she explained, was a quiet, brilliant man who saw the violence escalating, the honor among thieves dissolving. He wanted out, but men like him were never allowed to retire. "He disappeared when I was 15, she said, her eyes fixed on a point on the far wall, reliving it. "One day, he was there. The next, he was just gone. They said he ran, that he stole from them." "Did he?" "He stole an insurance policy," she said, finally meeting Dominic's gaze. "A ledger, not just numbers, but names, offshore accounts, shell companies, payment routes, everything. The real backbone of the organization. He took it, and he vanished. He left me and my mother behind as collateral." Dominic felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. "They came for us," Camilla continued, her voice trembling, but her eyes dry and hard. "My mother, she managed to get me out. She told me to run and never look back. I did. I ended up in the foster system. I never saw her again." "And La Colina?" "They never stopped looking. Not for him, and not for the ledger. They assumed he had passed it to me, or that I knew where it was. For the last 10 years, I've been a ghost. Cash jobs, new apartments every 6 months, no friends, no ties, just running." "What changed?" Dominic asked, his voice low. "Why come to me? Why now?" "About 4 months ago, I was seen," she said, a shiver running through her. "I got careless. I used a debit card. Just once. A small transaction. It was enough. A week later, I saw him. A man from my past, from my father's world. He was watching my apartment. I packed a bag and ran. But this time, they were everywhere. "How did you find me?" "My father," she said, a small, bitter smile touching her lips. "He was meticulous. He told me if I was ever in real, desperate trouble, there were alliances, people who hated the Salazars as much as he did. He said your family, the Rossi family, was built on a code they had abandoned. He had your father's private number, and then, through research, I found yours. I thought I could trade information, tell you that La Colina was in your systems, in exchange for help, for a way out." She slumped back against the pillows, the confession draining the last of her energy. "I was watching your warehouse for 2 days, trying to get the nerve to approach you, to find a way in, then the truck, the accident. And suddenly, I was in your arms, and he was there. The man who was following me. He was one of the shooters at the warehouse. He saw me. He recognized me." Dominic stood and walked to the window, looking out over the glittering, indifferent sprawl of Los Angeles. It all made a terrible kind of sense. The breach in his system was not just a simple hack. La Colina was using her father's old intel, his old pathways, to get inside, and now they believed she had the one thing that could destroy them completely, the ledger. He turned back to her. "Do you have it, Camilla? The ledger." She shook her head, her expression one of pure, exhausted defeat. "No, I've never seen it. I don't know where it is. I think my father made it all up to give me a head start, a boogeyman to keep me running." "They don't believe that," Dominic said quietly. "They think you have it, and now they think I have you, which means they think I have the ledger." He scrubbed a hand over his face. This woman, this ghost, had inadvertently painted the largest target in the Western Hemisphere on his back. She was not just leverage, she was a ticking bomb, and she was also, he realized, the only person who might understand the architecture of the very organization trying to tear him apart. She held the key, even if she did not know it. The silence in the room stretched, filled only by the quiet hum of the air filtration system. Camilla watched him, her face pale, her eyes wide with a fear that was heartbreakingly familiar to him, the fear of a hunted animal. "You're gonna give me to them, aren't you?" she whispered, the words so quiet he barely heard them. "To make this go away." The question hit him with physical force. He looked at her, at this woman who had survived for a decade on nothing but shadows and nerve, who had been run down and beaten, who had woken up terrified and still managed to put the pieces together. The thought of trading her, of throwing her to the wolves, was viscerally repulsive. "No," he said, his voice rough. "No, I'm not." He crossed back to her. She needed rest. The nurse had left fresh bandages and antiseptic on the bedside table. "Your ribs," he said, his tone shifting, becoming practical. "The doctor said the dressing needs to be changed." Camilla looked at the supplies, then at him, a new, different kind of tension entering the room. I think I can manage." "Don't be stupid, Joe," he said, not unkindly. He grabbed a small stool and sat beside the bed. "This will be faster. Turn." She hesitated, her hands clutching the robe at her collar. This was an intimacy far greater than the desperation in the hospital room. This was a conscious choice. Slowly, she turned her back to him, shrugging the pale blue robe off one shoulder. Her skin was a canvas of trauma, the deep purple and yellow of the bruising stark against her pale skin. The tape and gauze were wrapped tightly around her rib cage. He worked with a surprisingly gentle efficiency, his large, calloused hands carefully peeling back the medical tape. She winced, a sharp intake of breath. "Sorry," he murmured. "It's fine," she breathed. His fingers brushed her skin as he worked, unwrapping the bandage. Her skin was warm, soft beneath his rough touch. He could feel the slight tremor running through her. He tried to be clinical, to focus on the task, but he was acutely aware of the curve of her spine, the vulnerability of her shoulder blades. As he finished unwrapping, the robe, no longer held in place, slipped further, sliding down her arm to pool at her elbow, exposing the delicate line of her shoulder and the swell of her breast. She froze. He froze. His hand, which had been resting on her back to steady her, was suddenly no longer a nurse's. It was a man's. He could feel the heat of her, the silk of her skin. He did not move. He did not pull away. His thumb stroked, almost unconsciously, just once, against her back. She did not pull the robe up. She did not move at all. She just breathed. He cleared his throat, the sound loud in the quiet room. "I need to clean it." He applied the antiseptic to the fresh gauze, his movements deliberate. When his hand returned to her side, his touch was impossibly light, his fingers brushing the skin just below her breast as he secured the new bandage. She arched slightly into his touch, a small, involuntary movement, her head tipping forward, her dark hair curtaining her face. He finished, his hand lingering for a beat, 2, 3. His fingers spread, spanning her side, his thumb resting just at the edge of the new dressing. He felt a sudden, powerful urge to pull her back against him, to wrap his arms around her, to be a shield. "Dominic," she whispered, her voice thick. He pulled his hand away as if burned, standing up abruptly. "It's done." She turned, pulling the robe back up, her face flushed, her eyes bright and confused. She looked at him, really looked at him, with an intensity that stripped him bare. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? The ambulance, this fortress, the bandages. You sent a message to Alvarez. You've declared a war on my behalf. Why? You don't know me." He stared at her, the raw honesty of her question demanding the same from him. He could have given her a dozen logical answers. "You're a strategic asset. You have information I need. La Colina is my enemy, too." But what came out was the one simple truth that had haunted him since she had woken up. "Because you were dying on a gurney in a hospital hallway," he said, his voice low and rough. "And you looked at me, and you called me Dom." Her breath hitched, the confusion in her eyes softened, replaced by something he could not name, something that mirrored the strange, aching pull in his own chest. "No one has called me that in 10 years, he continued, the admission costing him. "Not since my brother. You looked at me like you knew me, like you trusted me, and you said my name." She just stared at him, the tears that had refused to fall for her own pain now welling in her eyes. I don't know why I said that. It came out." "I know." He did not know who moved first, perhaps neither of them. Perhaps the small space between them simply collapsed, pulling them into the same orbit. He was sitting on the edge of her bed, and his hand was on her face, his thumb tracing the bruise on her cheekbone. "You're safe here, Camilla," he whispered. "I swear on my family's name, I will not let them touch you." She leaned into his palm, her eyes closing, a single tear escaping and tracing a hot path over his thumb. "No one has ever said that to me before." "It's time someone did." His gaze dropped to her mouth. He hesitated. 1,000 alarms screaming in his head. This was his charge. She was vulnerable. This was wrong. But the pull was too strong. It was not just desire. It was recognition. He leaned in, his movement achingly slow, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. She met him halfway, her cold, trembling hand coming up to rest on his wrist, anchoring him. Their first kiss was not a collision. It was a landing. It was soft, hesitant, and profoundly gentle. It was his lips brushing hers. A question. It was her mouth, softening under his. An answer. It was a sharing of breath, a quiet promise in the sterile room. It tasted of antiseptic, coffee, and a deep shared loneliness. When he pulled back, it was only an inch. Her eyes were still closed, her breath unsteady. "Dom," she whispered again, the name a prayer this time. That broke him. With a low groan, he slid his hand from her cheek to the back of her neck, pulling her to him. This was not a kiss. This was an embrace. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the clean scent of the hospital soap, his other arm coming around her, careful of her ribs, pulling her flush against his chest. She clung to him, her arms wrapped around his neck, her fingers digging into his shoulders as if he were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. She began to tremble, then to sob, deep. Racking sounds she had held back for a decade, the terror, the loneliness, the pain, it all came pouring out. He just held her, his hand rubbing circles on her back, his chin resting on the top of her head. He said nothing. He just let her break, and he held the pieces. He held her until the sobs subsided into exhausted, shuddering breaths, and she was lax against him, her face tucked into the curve of his neck. He had come to this room to get answers. He had found something else entirely. The next 2 days were a strange, suspended reality. The war outside raged, but in the suite, there was a fragile peace. They talked. He brought her meals himself. She told him about her life on the run, the close calls, the fear. He listened, his respect for her growing with every story. He, in turn, found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about his father, about the weight of the name, about the brother he had lost. On the third night, his phone, which had been blessedly silent, buzzed with an urgent summons. He met his top lieutenant, Ray Cervelli, in the reception area. Ray was older, the consigliere of his organization, a man of logic and numbers where Marco and Silas were men of action. "Dominic," Ray said, his face grim, his thin suit immaculate. "We have a problem. A new one." "La Colina?" "No. Worse in some ways. The Cervalos family." Dominic swore. The Cervalos family were rivals from the old country, scavengers who had been trying to get a foothold in his territory for years. "They know you're distracted," Ray said, lowering his voice. "They know you've gone to ground with this La Colina business. They're making a move on the Moretti territory, trying to squeeze our shipping lanes from the south." The Moretti territory was the historical name for their core turf, named for his grandfather. It was the heart of his empire. "They see weakness," Dominic growled, the ice returning to his voice. "They think I'm vulnerable." "They're calling for a sit-down," Ray said. "They claim it's about renegotiating boundaries. We both know it's a test. If you don't show, they'll take it as confirmation. They'll escalate." Dominic's jaw tightened. "When?" "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Their ground, a restaurant in the valley." "It's a trap," Dominic said instantly. "Of course it is," Ray agreed, "which is why we'll be prepared. But you have to go. You have to show them the wolf is still at the door." Dominic nodded, his mind already calculating, the brief, warm peace of the last 2 days evaporating. "Set it up. I'll be there." He went back into the suite. Camilla was asleep, the lines of fear and pain erased from her face, making her look younger. He watched her for a long time, the protective instinct in him so fierce it was a physical ache. The next evening, he was dressing in the sitting room, shrugging on a dark suit jacket, checking the fit of the custom holstered pistol beneath his arm. "Where are you going?" He turned. She was standing in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, the blue robe her only armor. Her eyes were wide with a new, sharp fear. "I have a meeting," he said. His voice clipped, his mind already on the coming confrontation. "A meeting," she repeated, her voice flat, "like my father used to have." She walked toward him, her bare feet silent on the carpet. "With the Cervalos family? I've seen that name in my father's notes. They're not like you, Dom. They're butchers." "It's business," and he said, trying to deflect, to shield her from this part of his life. "It's an ambush," she said, her voice rising. "They know you're fighting La Colina. They think you're weak. Don't go. Please." She grabbed the front of his jacket, her knuckles white. "Please, Dom, this is what they do. This is how it starts. You'll walk in, and you won't walk out. I know this. Don't go." He looked down at her, at the genuine, desperate terror in her eyes. This was not the fear of a victim. This was the fear of someone who had seen the script before and knew the ending. He gently cupped her face, his hands hard and sure. "I'm not your father. Camilla, I am not a bookkeeper. I'm not walking into anything I can't handle. I have to do this. I have to show them there is no weakness." "They'll kill you," she sobbed, the tears finally coming, hot and fast. "And it will be my fault, because I brought this to you." "Hey," he said, his voice firm but gentle, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Look at me. Nothing that happens out there is your fault. This is my world, my choice." He kissed her forehead, a hard, brief press of his lips against her skin. A promise. "I'll come back to you." He untangled her fingers from his jacket and walked out, not looking back. He could not. The restaurant was exactly what he expected. Too much red velvet, too much dark wood, too many private booths. Marco, Silas, and Ray had swept it hours before. His men were outside, in the kitchen, in the valet stand. He was as safe as he could be on enemy ground. He sat across from Rico Servalos, a man whose smile never reached his cold, dead eyes. The talking was pointless. It was posturing. Servalos offered condolences for his troubles. Dominic accepted them with a thin smile. Servalos talked about rebalancing territories. Dominic told him there was nothing to rebalance. The signal was subtle. Rico Servalos picked up his water glass, and every waiter in the room. Men Dominic's team had cleared, drew weapons. They had been infiltrated. The world exploded. Marco flipped the heavy oak table, providing a half-second of cover. "Boss, move!" Dominic drew his weapon, firing twice, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. He felt a searing, white-hot pain rip through his left shoulder, staggering him. He went down on one knee, the impact driving the breath from his lungs, a bullet. Silas was a roar, a blur of motion, grabbing him by the back of his jacket and hauling him bodily toward the kitchen, shielding him with his own massive frame. Gunfire erupted from everywhere and glass shattered. People screamed. "Ray, the back!" Marco yelled, providing covering fire, his shots precise, controlled. They burst through the kitchen, a chaotic scene of steam and shouting. Silas kicked open the steel delivery door, and they were in the alley. The cold night air a shock. Ray was already there, the engine of their armored car roaring to life. "Go! Go!" Marco yelled, shoving Dominic into the back seat and climbing in after him. The car fishtailed out of the alley, a spray of automatic fire sparking off the rear window, the armored glass holding... "Boss!" Marco yelled, turning. Dominic was slumped against the door, his face pale, his hand clamped tight over his shoulder, the dark suit jacket already black and slick with blood. "It's just my shoulder," he gritted out, the pain a nauseating, spreading fire. "Just get me back. Get me to the clinic. Get me to her." The drive was a blur of red lights and agonizing pain. When they reached the private elevator, Silas practically carried him, his blood leaving a dark trail on the pristine carpet. The elevator doors opened to the suite. Camilla was standing there, as if she had not moved since he left. Her face was bleach white, her eyes huge and dark. She saw the blood. She saw his face, contorted in pain, his pristine suit ruined. She saw Silas and Marco, their faces grim, their guns still drawn. He had kept his promise. He had come back. He stumbled, and she rushed forward, her hands hovering, not knowing where to touch, her whole body shaking. "Dom," she whispered, her voice breaking. He looked at her, a faint, pained smile twisting his lips. "See, I told you." He pitched forward, and she caught him, his dead weight falling against her, her arms wrapping around his waist. She held him up, sobbing his name, the front of her pale blue robe turning a dark, terrible crimson. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 1,000 feet above a city that looked like a carpet of diamonds. It was the only place Dominic truly felt secure. The clinic had been a temporary solution, but after the ambush, it was a liability. He had moved her here, to his home, under the care of his private physician. The doctor, a man with the discreet professionalism of someone paid handsomely for his silence, had stitched Dominic's shoulder, administered a heavy dose of antibiotics, and left. He pronounced the wound clean, the bullet having gone through the thick muscle without shattering the bone. Lucky. Now, in the sterile silence of the master bedroom, the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a throbbing, nauseating pain. Dominic sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, bare-chested, his jaw set as Camila, her face pale and set in grim determination, prepared to change the dressing. "I don't need a nurse," he growled, the words tight. "That's good, because I'm not one," she retorted, her hands surprisingly steady, soaking a cloth in a bowl of warm antiseptic water. "But you're bleeding through the bandage, and you're too stubborn to ask for help. So, sit still." He watched her, a reluctant admiration cutting through his pain. She was not the trembling girl from the hospital. She was not the haunted woman from the clinic. This was someone new, someone forged in the fire of the last few days. She knelt on the bed in front of him, her movements careful. "This is gonna sting," she murmured. She began to clean the wound. Her touch was light, but as the antiseptic hit the raw, stitched flesh, he hissed, his entire body tensing. "I told you," she whispered, her voice catching. He looked at her. Her steady hands had begun to tremble. Her eyes were fixed on the ruined flesh of his shoulder, the angry red and purple that spread across his skin. A single tear tracked down her cheek, then another. She did not make a sound, just continued to work, her tears falling onto his arm. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. He put his good hand over hers, stilling her movements. "It's just a scratch." That broke her. The emotional dam that had been cracking for days finally shattered. She dropped the cloth. Her face crumpled, and she began to sob. It was not a quiet weeping. It was a raw, terrified, gut-wrenching sound that filled the vast, empty room. "They're gonna kill you," she choked out, her hands coming up to cover her face. "That bullet, it was for me. I brought this to you. I brought this death, to your door. You're going to die. You're going to die for me. And I can't. I can't." He grabbed her by the wrists, his grip surprisingly strong, pulling her hands away from her face. Her eyes were red, her face slick with tears, her expression one of absolute, unadulterated terror. He saw it then. She was not just afraid of him, or for him. She was terrified of losing him. "It was my choice," and he said, his voice a low growl. "My fight." "You don't understand," she cried. "They won't stop. They'll keep coming until you're dead, until I'm dead. This is all my fault." Something in him snapped. The control he had maintained for a decade, the ice in his veins, it all melted, replaced by a scalding, raw hunger. He was tired of the violence, tired of the strategies, tired of the fear. He looked at her, crying for him, and he saw the only thing that had felt real in years. He pulled her to him and crushed his mouth to hers. It was not gentle. It was not the hesitant, exploratory kiss from the clinic. This was a kiss of raw hunger, a desperate claiming. It was brutal and punishing and possessive, a drowning man's last breath. She gasped into his mouth, her own terror momentarily eclipsed by the sheer force of his need. He kissed her like he was trying to erase the last 10 years, to pour all his strength, his rage, and his desperate, aching need for her into that single, violent point of contact. She met his hunger with her own, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. He groaned, the pain in his shoulder flaring, but he ignored it. He shifted on the bed, his good arm wrapping around her waist, and with a strength that surprised her. He lifted her. She instinctively wrapped her legs around his hips as he pulled her onto his lap, her body flush against his, straddling his good side. "Dom," she breathed, the word a plea, her lips bruised from his. His hands were everywhere, in her hair, on her back, gripping her hips, pulling her impossibly closer. Her own fingers. trembling, went to his face, as if memorizing him. They traced his jaw, his neck, then moved lower to the front of her own robe. Her hands fumbled with the tie, her knuckles brushing his bare stomach. He pushed her hands away, his touch rough, and undid the knot himself. He tugged the robe open, his gaze dark and fixed on her. The pale blue fabric fell away, pooling at her waist. She was trembling, exposed in the dim light of the bedroom, the city lights painting patterns on her skin. He looked at her, not with just desire, but with a fierce, burning ownership. "You are," he started, his voice thick, but he could not find the words. Instead, he bent his head, his lips, hot and demanding, found the hollow of her throat. She arched back, her hands gripping his biceps, her nails digging into his skin. His mouth moved lower, over her collarbone. Her breath hitched. She was crying again, but silently now, the tears tracking, a release of tension. Not fear. Her own lips, seeking, desperate, moved from his jaw down his neck to his chest. She found the old scar there, a pale white line from a fight long ago, and she pressed a soft, trembling kiss to it. He inhaled sharply, his entire body going rigid. He gripped the back of her head, his fingers twisting in her hair, and brought her face back to his. "Camilla," he whispered, and the way he said it, the raw, guttural sound of it, was not just a name. It was a vow. It was an oath. He kissed her again, deeply, and laid her back against the cool, high-thread count sheets, his body following hers, covering her, shielding her from the world. He was careful of his shoulder, but there was an urgency to his movements, an animalistic need to claim her, to make her his, to prove they were both still alive. He was a man of shadows and control, but with her, he was utterly, beautifully undone. Much later, the city was asleep. The only sound in the room was their breathing. Camilla lay with her head on his chest, curled against his good side. The sheets were a tangled mess around them. His hand, the one that was not wounded, was resting on her bare back, his fingers idly tracing the delicate knobs of her spine. It was a slow, possessive, comforting gesture. For the first time in her adult life, she felt completely, unequivocally safe. The fortress of glass and steel was nothing. The man beside her was everything. He broke the silence, his voice a low rumble beneath her ear. "You're not just someone I'm protecting, Camilla." She lifted her head to look at him. In the darkness, his eyes were intense, fixed on her. "You understand me?" he continued, his voice rough. This is not a game. You are not a pawn." He brushed a strand of damp hair from her temple. "You're mine. Mine to protect. Mine to keep. I'm not letting you go. Not to La Colina. Not to the FBI. Not to anyone. Ever." His words, which should have sounded like a threat, like a cage, were the most comforting thing she had ever heard. Mine to keep. But the words also triggered a profound, sickening guilt. He was offering her his absolute protection, his life, and she was holding back the one thing that mattered, his declaration, his vow. It left her with no choice. She tensed, and he felt it instantly. "What?" She sat up, pulling the sheet to her chest, her back to him. "Dom, I have to tell you something. I lied to you. At the clinic." He was still, but she could feel the change in the air, the sudden drop in temperature. "About what?" "The ledger," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My father's ledger." She heard him move, the rustle of sheets as he sat up behind her. "You told me you didn't have it." I didn't think I did. I thought it was a ghost story he made up. But when I knew they were watching me, a few weeks ago, I went to his old storage unit, the one I've been paying for in cash for 10 years. I tore it apart. I found a false bottom in his old desk. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide with the confession. "It was there, Dom, a single encrypted flash drive." He was out of bed in an instant, his pain forgotten. He stood in the moonlight, a naked, dangerous silhouette. his shoulder a landscape of shadow and bandages. "Where is it?" "When I ran," she said, her voice trembling, "I knew I couldn't keep it on me. I knew if they caught me, they would search me. So I hid it." "Where?" he demanded, his voice the one that had executed a man, cold and flat. "There's a diner in Burbank, a place I used to go when I first ran away. There's an old-fashioned payphone booth outside. The metal housing, it's loose. I slid the drive inside the casing, behind the telephone unit itself." He was already moving, pulling on a pair of black sweatpants, his phone in his hand. "Dom, wait," she said, scrambling from the bed, grabbing the robe. "There's more. I was going to give it to the FBI. That's why I emptied my bank account. I was going to trade it for witness protection, for a new life. I drove to the federal building. I sat in the parking lot for an hour, but I couldn't do it. I got scared. I knew they had people everywhere. I knew they'd find me. So I ran, and I hid the drive, and I was trying to find you when you were run down," he finished for her, his back to her. He was dialing. "The FBI. You would have put a target on this entire city." He put the phone to his ear. "Marco, I need a retrieval. Now. Corner of Victory and Olive. There's a payphone booth. Inside the unit housing, there's a drive. Take Silas, full tactical. Go dark. No comms until you have it. Go." He hung up and stood staring out the window, his shoulders rigid. "Dom," she whispered, walking up behind him, her hand hovering, afraid to touch him. "You should have told me," he said, his voice void of emotion. "I was scared," she pleaded. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't know if you'd just take it and give me to them." He turned, his face a mask of cold fury. "And what do you think I am? Do you think I am them?" "No," she whispered, tears welling. "No, I trust you." "Good," he said, the word clipped. "Now we wait." The waiting was the worst part. An hour passed, then two. The silence in the penthouse was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Camilla paced. Dominic stood by the window, as still as a statue, watching the city, his phone in his hand. Finally, the phone vibrated. He answered it on the first buzz. It was Silas. "Boss." The voice was wrong. It was strained, full of static and pain. "Talk to me, Silas," Dominic said, his voice lethally quiet. "It was a setup, boss, a clean-out. The drive was gone. They knew we were coming." Dominic's blood ran cold. "What?" We got to the booth. It was empty. The housing was already ripped open. They were waiting, on the rooftops. 6 at least, high-powered rifles. They had us pinned before we even knew what was happening. "Our men?" Dominic demanded, his knuckles white on the phone. A long, heavy pause. "We lost Antonio, boss. Took a round to the chest. He was gone instantly. Marco's hit in the leg, but he's with me. We're clear, but Antonio's gone." Dominic closed his eyes. Antonio, 24 years old, a good kid. He hung up the phone without another word. "What?" Camilla asked, her hand at her throat. "What is it?" He turned, and the fury in his eyes was so cold, so absolute, it made her stumble back. They were waiting for them. He picked up a heavy crystal tumbler from the bar and hurled it against the far wall. It exploded in a shower of glass. Camilla screamed. "They knew!" he roared, his good hand slamming against the window, the glass groaning in protest. "They knew where it was. They knew we were going for it. They were waiting." Just then, his private elevator chimed. Ray Cervelli walked in, his face pale and grim. "Dominic, I came as soon as I got the call from Silas." "They knew, Ray," Dominic said, his voice a low growl. "First, the Cervalos ambush. They knew my security. Now this, they knew where the drive was, and they knew I was sending a team." "Dominic," Ray said, his voice quiet, his eyes dark. "Only 4 people knew about that retrieval. You, me, Marco, and Silas. And I know it was not Marco or Silas." "And it's not you," Dominic said, the realization landing like a coffin lid. The leak? It's not just a leak. It's a mole, Ray said, stating the terrible truth. Someone high level. Someone who has eyes on you. Someone who knew about the Cervalos sit-down. Someone who heard you get that location from her. We have a rat in the house. Dominic. And he just got Antonio killed. Dominic's face became a mask of ice. The rage vanished, replaced by something far more terrifying. A cold, absolute certainty. Get everyone here, he said to Ray. All my lieutenants, every man with command, wake them up. Drag them out of bed. I want them in this living room in 30 minutes. 20 minutes later, the vast living room was full. 12 men, his inner circle. His capos and most trusted lieutenants stood in a silent, terrified semicircle. They were in various states of dress, all of them pale, all of them avoiding his eyes. Dominic stood before them, his arm in a fresh sling, his face carved from granite. Ray stood beside him. Camilla watched from the shadows of the hallway, her hand over her mouth, sick with dread. Antonio is dead, Dominic said, his voice quiet, carrying across the room. He died tonight, walking into a trap, an ambush that was set because someone in this room, someone I have trusted with my life, is a traitor. The men shifted, murmurs of disbelief and anger. The Cervalos meeting was a trap, Dominic continued, his voice cutting through the noise. They knew my security detail. Tonight, they knew where to find a package, and they knew my men were coming. Someone is feeding La Colina everything. He began to walk the line, his eyes moving from one man to the next. He stopped in front of a man named Vinny, a lieutenant who had been with his father. Vinny, Dominic said, his voice conversational. Your sister, Anna, she's been sick. Cancer, I heard. Vinny paled, his eyes darting nervously. Yes, boss, pancreatic, it's bad. Terrible, Dominic agreed, his voice soft. And the treatments, experimental. Very expensive. We're managing boss, Vinny stammered. Are you? Dominic said. Because I had Ray run your financials. $100,000 was deposited into your wife's account 3 days ago, the day of the Cervalos meeting, and another $100,000 landed this afternoon from an offshore shell company. One I know from my father's own books that the Salazars used, the one La Colina uses now. Vinny's face crumpled. Boss, please. They found you, Dominic stated, his voice dead. They threatened your sister. They said they'd kill her, Vinny suddenly screamed, his composure breaking, tears streaming down his face. They said they'd kill her, and my kids. I didn't have a choice. What was I supposed to do? He lunged, not at Dominic, but to plead, Silas, who had been standing guard by the door. His leg bandaged, moved with surprising speed, slamming Vinny to his knees. You sold Antonio for your sister, Dominic said, his voice echoing in the silent room. You sold me. You sold this family. Please, Vinny sobbed, on his knees. Mercy for my family. From the hallway, Camilla whispered. Dom, no, please, don't. Dominic did not look at her. He looked at Vinny. Then he looked at his other men, his gaze sweeping over them, cold and hard. This is the price of betrayal, he said. He pulled his pistol from the waistband of his pants. This is the only mercy there is. He fired once. The sound was deafening, final. Vinny collapsed. The room was utterly, sickeningly silent, filled with the smell of cordite. Camilla choked back a scream, her body shaking violently. Silas, Dominic said, his voice unchanged. Get him out of here. He looked at Vinny's body. And send word to his family. His sister's medical bills are covered for life. His debt to La Colina is paid. He looked up, his cold gaze sweeping his remaining men. His betrayal is also paid. Am I understood? The men nodded, their faces ashen. The message was brutal and clear. The men filed out, leaving the three of them, Dominic, Camilla, and Ray, in the vast, silent room. Ray nodded once to Dominic and left, leaving them alone. The penthouse, once a fortress, felt like a tomb. Camilla was backed against the hallway wall, shaking, her eyes fixed on the spot where Vinny had fallen. You killed him," she whispered, her voice hollow. "He betrayed us," Dominic said, his voice flat. He was reloading his weapon, the click of the magazine a sickening punctuation. "He was scared," she cried, her voice suddenly rising, hysterical. "They threatened his family. He was trapped. You didn't even... You executed him." "This is my world, Camilla," he said, turning to her, his face a hard, unforgiving mask. "This is the world you ran to. There are rules. He broke the first and last one. He got a good man killed." "I can't," she said, sliding down the wall, her hands in her hair. "I can't. This is what I ran from. My entire life. The blood, the finality. This is my father's world. This is a nightmare." She looked up at him, her eyes wild with a new, dawning horror. "I don't belong here. I can't be this. I can't watch this. I have to go." His mask finally cracked. For the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes, the fear of losing her. "Go where?" he demanded, advancing on her, his voice rising. "They have the drive. They know who you are. They will hunt you to the ends of the earth. You are not safe anywhere but with me." "Whoa, this isn't safety," she screamed, scrambling to her feet, backing away from him. "This is a different cage, a prettier one. But it's still a cage, and you're the monster in it." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stopped. "A monster," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. I didn't mean that," she stammered, seeing the profound hurt in his eyes. "Don't leave me," he said, the words torn from him, a raw plea that stripped him bare. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and gripped her upper arms, his good hand tight, desperate. "Do not leave me, Camilla, not now, not after this." The anger, the violence, the fear, the desperation, it all collided. He pulled her to him and kissed her, his mouth finding hers. It was not the hunger of before. It was something slower, more desperate, an aching, breaking thing. It was a plea. "Don't go. Don't leave me alone in this." She fought him for a second, her fists beating weakly against his chest, but her fight melted. She was crying into the kiss, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, clinging to him. He was a monster. He was a killer. He was her savior. He was the only thing holding her world together. He carefully lifted her, his wounded shoulder protesting, and carried her back to the bedroom, kicking the door shut. This time, their lovemaking was slow, aching, and desperate. It was as if it might be the last time. Every touch was a question, every kiss a confession. It was 2 broken, haunted people clinging to each other, seeking a moment of life in a world consumed by death. He kissed the tears from her face, his touch reverent. She kissed his wounded shoulder, his hands, his chest. It was a prayer. It was a goodbye. Afterward, they lay tangled, the silence of the room a shroud. She was the first to speak, her voice a whisper against his skin, a confession that terrified her more than any bullet. "I'm falling in love with you, Dominic." He tensed, the words hitting him harder than the bullet, harder than her anger. He could not say it back. The words would not come. He did not know how. Instead, he just held her tighter, his face buried in her hair, holding her as if she were the only life he had. The peace lasted for an hour. Then it was shattered by the sharp, insistent buzz of his phone on the nightstand, a text message from an unknown number. "What is it?" Camilla murmured, her voice sleepy. He sat up, his gut twisting. He opened the message. It was a video file. He pressed play. The image was grainy, lit by a single swaying bulb. A young man, in his early 20s, was tied to a chair. His face was a swollen, bloody mask. Camilla gasped, suddenly wide awake. "Oh, God! Oh, my God, no!" "Who is he?" Dominic demanded, his voice turning to ice. It's Leo," she sobbed, her hand flying to her mouth, her body starting to shake. "My foster brother. From the last home, he was He was the only one who was kind. The only one. On the screen, Leo looked at the camera, his eyes wide with animal terror. "Cammy!" he cried, his voice muffled and thick with blood. "Please, Cammy, I don't know anything. I told them. They said you have to come for me. They said to tell you. La Colina always collects." The video cut to black. Camilla was hysterical, scrambling out of the bed, grabbing for her robe. "We have to go. We have to get him. Oh, God, they've got Leo." Dominic grabbed her, his arm a steel band, holding her still. His face was grim, the mask of the boss back in place, but his eyes were burning. "It's a trap, Camilla," he said, his voice flat. "They have the drive. They have the mole. Now they're using him to get to you." "I don't care," she screamed, struggling against him, her nails digging into his arm. "He's family. He's the only family I have left. You have to help me. You promised. You said you'd protect me." He looked at the black screen of his phone. They had him. They had found her last weakness, the one thing he could not protect her from, her past, and they were pulling the string. The black screen of the phone was a mirror reflecting Camilla's shattered face. The image of Leo, bloody and terrified, was seared behind her eyes. The penthouse, her glass fortress of safety, suddenly felt like a cage, too high up, too far from the ground, too far from him. "We have to go," she said, the words a hoarse whisper, then louder, a command born of pure panic. "We have to go now! Dominic!" She was scrambling, pulling on the clothes she had worn days ago, her hands shaking so violently she could not work the zipper. "He's all I have. He was kind to me. He was just a kid. They're going to kill him. We have to go." "Camilla." Dominic's voice was a flat line of ice, cutting through her hysteria. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip hard, forcing her to be still. "It is a trap. Do you understand me? A trap." "I don't care," she screamed, her fist beating against his chest, a futile, desperate rhythm. "What does it matter? They have him. They're hurting him. What was the point of any of this, of Vinny, of us? If you won't help me, if you let him die." "Because they want you," he bit out, his face inches from hers, his good shoulder holding her steady. "They have the drive. They have a mole. They've lost their leverage. So they found new leverage. They are using this boy to draw you out, away from me. The moment you are in their hands, you are dead. And so is he." His logic was brutal and flawless. It was also completely, utterly unacceptable. She stopped struggling, her body going limp, her head falling forward. "So you'll do nothing, nay," she whispered, the defeat in her voice more terrible than her screams. "You'll let them kill him, just like you killed Vinny." The words struck him, a low blow. He had killed one man to enforce his law and was now, through inaction, condemning another. He looked at her, at this woman who had survived a decade of running, who had been broken and rebuilt in his arms, who had just confessed her love for him. He saw the future in her eyes. If he let Leo die, he would save her life. But he would lose her. She would look at him forever and see just another monster who had made a tactical choice. He let out a long, slow breath. The decision costing him, the boss, the tactician, the cold-blooded leader, was overruled by the man. "All right," he said, his voice rough. She looked up, her eyes wide, hope and terror warring in her gaze. "What?" "All right." He released her and turned, grabbing his phone, his penthouse, the quiet sanctuary of glass and shadows, transformed instantly into a war room. "Silas, Marco, get here, now. Full tactical. Wake up, Ray." He was already at his desk, pulling up satellite maps of the city on a massive, wall-mounted screen. "They're at the docks," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion save for a cold, focused anger. "La Colina has a processing warehouse in San Pedro. It's their primary receiving point for imports. That's where they'll be." When Silas and Marco arrived, their faces were grim. Marco's leg was stiff, his limp pronounced. Silas's arm was in a sling, his expression murderous. They were a broken, battered crew. "Boss," Silas rumbled, his good hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "You know this is a trap." Of course it is, Dominic said, not looking up from the screen. They're expecting Camilla to come, either alone or with me. They're expecting a negotiation. They're expecting a trade. He zoomed in on the warehouse. They are not expecting a surgical raid. They are not expecting us. We are not going in to talk. We are going in to take the boy and to leave no one standing. This is not a rescue. This is a message. Ray Cervelli, his face pale and drawn, stepped forward. Dominic, this is reckless. You are wounded. Your best men are wounded. We just exposed one mole. But we both know Harrison is still out there. We are exposed. We are, Dominic agreed. And that's why we move now. While they think we're still reeling. While they're confident. He looked at his men. 4 of us. Me, Silas, Marco, and Rico. We go in dark. We use the old smuggling tunnels under the pier. We are in and out in 10 minutes. I'm going. The voice came from the doorway. Camilla was standing there, no longer hysterical. She was dressed in dark jeans and one of his own black sweaters. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a cold fire that matched his. Absolutely not, Dominic said, his voice final. You are the objective, Camilla. You will be a liability. A liability? She repeated, and he heard, for the first time, a true edge to her voice, an insult. I'm the only reason you're not already dead. Vinny was your liability. The mole you still haven't found is your liability. I am your only asset. She strode past him to the console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. You think that flash drive was the only copy? The one La Colina has now? She let out a short, bitter laugh. My father was a paranoid genius. He taught me one thing, redundancy. I made a full copy of that drive to a secure cloud server the day I found it. It's triple encrypted with an algorithm he built. I am the only person in the world who can open it. She hit a final key. The screen flickered, and then it was no longer a satellite map. It was a dense, unending spreadsheet of numbers, names, and routes. La Colina thinks they have the ledger, she said, her voice ringing with power. They have a piece of plastic. I am the ledger. She pointed to a line of code. This is what I can do. This is why you need me. She typed, and a new window opened. La Colina's New York banking routes, all routed through 3 shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. This is their East Coast revenue. I can freeze it. Right now, from this room, I can cut off their head. Ray and Silas stared, stunned. Dominic looked at her, and the protective lover was replaced by something else. Respect. She was not a victim. She was a queen. I am going, she said again, her voice quiet but absolute, because they are holding my brother to get to me. They might not even trade with you if I'm not there, but more than that, if this goes wrong, if they corner us, I'm the only one who can burn their entire empire to the ground with a single keystroke. That is my leverage. That is our leverage. You need me with you. Dominic stared at her for a long, silent moment. She had become as hard as he was. The world had forged her into his equal. He gave a single, sharp nod. You will stay in the car with Ray. You will not move. You will not argue. You will run our comms. That is the only way. Fine, she said. Good, Dominic said, turning to his men, a predatory smile touching his lips for the first time in days. Let's go to war. The docks were a graveyard of rusted metal, steeped in the smell of salt, diesel, and dead fish. A thick fog rolled in off the black water, clinging to the ground, swallowing sound. It was the perfect cover. Dominic, Silas, Marco, and Rico moved like shadows, their dark gear blending into the night. They used the old Prohibition-era tunnels, emerging from a grate directly beneath the target warehouse, bypassing the sentries on the perimeter. Inside the armored sedan, parked 3 blocks away, Camilla sat beside Ray. Her hands were on a laptop, her eyes on the 3 dots of the tracking devices on Dominic's team. They're in, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Dominic rose from the floor grate. The warehouse was vast, dark, and filled with the shapes of stacked crates. He heard voices, high up, in a glass-walled office that overlooked the floor. He gave the hand signal. Marco and Rico fanned left, toward the power conduit. Silas, A mountain of silent rage stayed with him, his shotgun at the ready, his eyes scanning the darkness. They found him. Leo was chained to a support pillar at the far end of the warehouse, just as the video had shown. He was unconscious, his head slumped on his chest. Silas moved forward, his good hand already working on the locks. Dominic stood guard, his pistol up, his gaze sweeping the catwalks above. "It's too easy," he whispered into his throat mic. "Dom!" Camilla's voice came back, tight with panic. "The trackers, they're not moving. The guards on the roof, it's a skeleton crew." "They're not expecting us," Dominic whispered. "No," a new voice said, echoing from the catwalks above. "We were expecting her." The floodlights snapped on, blinding them, plunging the warehouse into a stark, artificial daylight. At least 20 men lined the catwalks, all of them armed, their weapons trained on the warehouse floor. Dominic and Silas were exposed. "Dominic!" Camilla screamed over the comms. A man walked out of the high office. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to the grime of the warehouse. He was tall, his face scarred, his eyes cold and dead. This was the captain, the one who had been hunting her. "Dominic Rossi," the man called, his voice laced with a satisfied, mocking accent. "You brought your broken army to my door, and you did not bring the girl. A foolish mistake." "The boy," Dominic called back, his voice steady, his pistol never wavering from the man's chest. "Let him go. He has nothing to do with this." The captain laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "He has everything to do with this. He is the bait, and you are the fool who took it." He raised his hand. "Kill them." "Now, Marco," Dominic roared. Marco, positioned at the main circuit breaker, slammed his fist into the panel. The floodlights, the interior lights, every source of power in the warehouse died instantly, plunging them back into absolute, chaotic darkness. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks, panicked, blind firing. "Camilla, now!" Dominic yelled. In the car, Camilla's fingers flew. "Burning them," she whispered, her eyes wide. She hit the enter key. "It's done. Their New York accounts are frozen." Dominic, Silas, and Marco had night vision goggles. Their targets did not. The fight was not a fight. It was an execution. It was 3 predators moving through the dark, their suppressed weapons firing with calm, methodical precision. Men screamed and fell from the catwalks. It was over in 90 seconds. When the emergency lights, running on a separate battery, flickered on, the warehouse was silent, save for the dripping of water. Silas had Leo, who was groaning, slung over his good shoulder. Marco was covering the door. Dominic stood in the center of the floor, looking up at the office. The captain was gone. "He's running," Silas growled. "Not far," Dominic said. He ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. He kicked open the office door. The man was scrambling out a back exit, heading for the pier. Dominic pursued him, the sound of their footsteps echoing on the wet wooden planks of the dock. The fog was thick, visibility dropping to almost nothing. He could hear the man gasping, running ahead of him. He burst through a wall of fog, and the man was there, his back to the water, his pistol raised. They fired at the same time. Dominic felt a bullet tear through the sleeve of his jacket, a hot, stinging line. The captain was not so lucky. Dominic's shot was true. The man staggered, clutching his chest, a look of profound surprise on his face. She was just a bookkeeper," the man gurgled, blood at his lips. "She's a queen," Dominic said, walking forward. He kicked the man's gun away as it slipped from his fingers. The man looked at him, his eyes wide with his last realization. The ledger. It was never on the drive. Dominic leveled his pistol at the man's head. For Antonio. For Leo. He fired. The sound was flat. Swallowed by the fog, the body slumped and fell, a heavy splash in the black, oily water below. He stood there for a long moment, the adrenaline draining, leaving him cold. He felt something in the captain's jacket. He reached in. It was a flash drive, identical to the one he had sent Marco for, the one La Colina had taken. He stared at it, his father-in-law, Ricardo. He had left a trail. He had not just run. He had been playing a long, complex game. This was another piece. "Boss," Silas's voice came over the comm. "We're clear. Leo's alive. We're wheels up." Dominic pocketed the drive. "I'm coming." Back at the penthouse, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray. Leo was in a guest room, sedated. The doctor stitching the worst of his wounds. He would be fine. Camilla sat on the sofa in the living room, her body shaking with the adrenaline crash. Dominic walked in, his jacket off, his arm bleeding from the graze. She looked up, her eyes tracing the new wound. She stood, grabbed the first aid kit, and wordlessly began to clean it. Her hands were steady now. "You killed him," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," he said, his voice weary. "Thank you." She finished bandaging his arm, her touch lingering. He had done it. He had walked into the fire for her family. She looked up, her hand moving from his arm to his face, her thumb tracing the hard line of his jaw. "The world, the news, my father. They paint you as this monster, a killer, a criminal." He watched her, his expression unreadable. "My father was a coward who ran and left his family to die," she whispered, her eyes holding his. You are the man who runs toward the fire. You're nothing like what they say. You are the only man in my entire life who has ever kept his word to me." He turned his head, his lips pressing into her palm, a gesture of submission that was more intimate than any kiss. He felt a crack in the armor he had worn for a decade. She saw him, not the boss, not the monster, him. "Camilla," he said, his voice rough, thick with an emotion he could not name. He gripped her hand. "If we live through this, when this is over, would you ever leave me?" The question hung in the air, heavy and fragile. He was not asking as the boss. He was asking as a man, terrified of being alone again. She smiled, a small, sad, beautiful smile, her fingers laced with his. "Only if you asked me to," she said. The moment was broken by the sound of the elevator. Ray Cervelli walked in, his face ashen, his hands gripping a file so tightly his knuckles were white. "Dominic," Ray said, his voice heavy. "I found him. The real mole." Dominic was on his feet. "You were right. It wasn't just Vinny. He was a symptom. This is the disease." "Who?" "Harrison," Ray said, his voice full of disbelief and disgust. "Arthur Harrison, your lawyer." The betrayal was deeper than any bullet. Harrison, the man who had managed his father's estate, the man who had set up his legitimate corporations. He had been a part of the family for 20 years. "How?" Dominic's voice was ice. "He's been working with Rico Cervalos for months," Ray said, slapping the file down. "Long before Camilla. Cervalos was using La Colina as a weapon to soften you up. Harrison was feeding Cervalos your security protocols, your movements, the Cervalos ambush. Harrison cleared the security team. He let them plant their men." "The payphone," Dominic said, the pieces clicking into place. "He must have had this place bugged. He heard Camilla tell me the location." "He sold Vinny to us as a distraction," Ray finished, his face sick. "To make you think the leak was plugged. He's been playing you from the inside, for months. For Cervalos." Dominic stood silent for a full minute, the rage in him so cold and pure it was almost peaceful. He had been played. His family, La Colina, his own lawyer, all puppets, and Cervalos was the one pulling the strings. "Get Harrison," Dominic said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get him now. I don't care how. Bring him here, and tell him he's coming to finalize my will." "Boss?" "Then," Dominic continued, looking at Ray, his eyes hard as diamonds, "send a message to Rico Cervalos. I want a final sit-down. Tonight." Ray blanched. "Dominic, after last time, you can't be serious. He's the one behind it all." "He'll come," Dominic said. He's arrogant. He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'm grieving Antonio and Vinny. He'll come to watch me fall." "What's the offer?" Ray asked, his voice low. "The truce he always wanted. I give him the real ledger." He nodded toward Camilla. "The one she has. It has La Colina's entire infrastructure on it. He can use it to wipe them out completely. In exchange, he pulls out of my territory, and this war, all this bloodshed, it ends tonight." "No," Camilla said, stepping forward. "Dom, no. You can't meet him. He just tried to kill you. He's the one who's been hunting me, using La Colina. It's another trap." "It's the only way, Camilla," he said, turning to her. "No, it's not," she pleaded, grabbing the front of his shirt. "We have the ledger. We can do what I planned. We can go to the FBI. We can give them everything, La Colina and Servalos. We can take witness protection. We can just leave together. Please, Dom, please, just walk away from this. For me." He looked down at her, his expression softening for just a moment. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I can't," he whispered. "This is my city, my name, my father's legacy. If I run now, this life, it will follow us to the ends of the earth. We will never be safe." He kissed her forehead, a hard, final press of his lips, a promise and a goodbye. "I'm doing this so we can have a life," he said. "I'm doing it for you. This ends it." He turned to Ray, his face hardening once more. "Set it up. Neutral ground, the old cathedral. No armies, just me and him. And you." "I'll be right beside you, boss," Ray said, nodding. Dominic turned and walked toward the elevator, his wounded shoulder held high. Camilla watched him go, her hand at her mouth, a terrible, familiar premonition cold in her heart. She knew this script. She had seen it before. The abandoned cathedral was cold, the air smelling of damp stone and decay. Moonlight streamed through a broken stained glass window, illuminating the altar in a ghostly blue light. Dominic stood in the center aisle, Ray at his side. "This doesn't feel right, Dom," Ray murmured, his hand inside his coat. "It's the end of the line, Ray," Dominic said, his voice echoing in the vast, empty space. "One way or another." Rico Servalos stepped out from the shadows of the confessionals, his hands raised, a wide, confident smile on his face. He was alone. "Dominic," Servalos said, his voice jovial, "I'm so glad you saw reason. This has all been so unnecessarily bloody." "Rico," Dominic said, his voice flat, "just you?" "Just me," Servalos said, walking closer. "An agreement between gentlemen. You brought the gift?" "I did," Dominic said, holding up a sleek silver briefcase. "The full ledger, La Colina's entire network. It's yours." "Excellent," Miss Servalos said, his eyes gleaming. He stopped, 10 feet away. "And in exchange, as we agreed, the war is over. Your territory is yours. My apologies for the enthusiasm of my partners." "My lawyer," Dominic said. "Harrison, he was enthusiastic." Servalos' smile widened. "A necessary tool, as was La Colina, as was your father-in-law's phantom ledger. It all worked out perfectly. You're broken. I'm strong. Now give me the case." "It wasn't a phantom ledger," Dominic said, "and I'm not broken." "No?" Servalos laughed. "You're alone. Dominic, you're a king with no kingdom left. Vinny, Antonio, even your father's oldest friend, Arthur Harrison, all gone. You have nothing." "I have this," Dominic said. "And you, Rico, you made one mistake. You brought a traitor to a sit-down." "What?" Servalos' smile faltered. From the choir loft above, a single, high-powered shot rang out. It was not aimed at Dominic. Servalos looked down, a look of confusion on his face. A dark red stain was spreading across his white shirt. He looked up at Dominic, his eyes wide. "But, Harrison, the setup." "Harrison is gone," Dominic said, his voice cold. "And so is La Colina. You were right, Rico. It was a setup." "Not you," Servalos gurgled, falling to his knees. "No," a voice said from the shadows. Men stepped out. From the choir loft, From behind the pillars, Silas, Marco, Rico, Dominic's entire unbroken crew. And at their head, walking into the moonlight, was the man who had fired the shot, the man Servalos thought was his partner, the true leader of La Collina. Ray Cervelli lowered his rifle, his face a mask of cold triumph. "Ray?" Dominic whispered, his blood turning to ice. "I'm sorry, Dominic," Ray said, his voice laced with a lifetime of resentment. "But the Rossi family, your father, you've had this city for too long. It's my turn." "You?" Dominic breathed, the betrayal so profound it stopped his heart. "It was always you. Harrison, Servalos. They worked for you." "They were fools," Ray said, "just like your father. He never saw me coming, either. And now—" He raised the rifle, aiming it not at Dominic, but at his own chest, at his heart. "Now it ends." "No!" Dominic lunged. But Ray's gaze was fixed on him, a strange, sad smile on his face. La Collina's captain is dead, Servalos is dead, and now the loyal consigliere, Ray Cervelli, dies trying to save his boss. "Ray, don't—" "The ledger is clean, Dom," Ray whispered. "The war is over. La Collina is me, and I am gone. The family is yours, free, a final gift from the man you never saw." Ray squeezed the trigger. The sound of the shot was deafening, absolute. Ray collapsed backward, the briefcase flying from Dominic's hand, skittering across the stone floor. Dominic roared, a sound of pure, animalistic agony as he rushed to the man who had been his father's friend, his mentor. He skidded to his knees. "Why?" Dominic choked out, his hands pressing against the wound, a futile, desperate attempt. Ray looked up at him, his eyes already glazing, blood at his lips. He chose your father over me, and then he chose you. I built this, all of it, for nothing. But you love her. Run, Dom. Just run." Ray's hand fell open. He was dead. Dominic stared, his mind shattered, the pieces of his world, his past, his entire life, reassembling into a new, hideous picture. It had all been a lie. All of it. He heard a sound, a slow clap. He looked up. Rico Servalos was on his feet, a heavy layer of body armor visible beneath his ruined shirt, a bloody, triumphant smile on his face. The shot had been real, but not fatal. "What a performance!" Servalos spat, pulling his own pistol. "He was a traitor to a traitor. It doesn't matter. You're still alone, Rossi. And you're still dead." Gunfire erupted, but it was not from Servalos. It was from the church entrance. Camilla stood there, her face a mask of terror, a pistol grasped in both her trembling hands. She had fired, wildly, into the ceiling. "Get away from him!" she screamed. Servalos turned, laughing, and raised his pistol toward her. "The little bookkeeper. Come to die with him." "No!" Dominic roared. He lunged, grabbing Ray's fallen rifle, but he was too far. Servalos fired. The sound of Rico Servalos' gun was a flat, deafening crack in the stone cathedral. Dominic roared, a sound of pure negation, as he saw Camilla thrown backward, her body limp, slamming against the ancient wooden door. The pistol spun from her grasp, clattering uselessly on the stone floor. "No!" That single, guttural cry was all he had. Servalos, his smile a bloody rictus, turned the pistol back toward Dominic, who was still on his knees, his world shattered, Ray's body still warm beside him. "And now, the king," Servalos sneered. Another shot, but this one was not from Servalos. It was from the doorway. Silas stood there, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His shotgun barked, a sound like the end of the world. The blast caught Servalos in the chest, the force of it lifting him off his feet, throwing him backward into the altar, which splintered under his weight. He did not move again. "Boss!" Silas bellowed, already moving. But Dominic was not looking at him. He was not looking at Ray's body or Servalos's. He was crawling, scrambling across the cold stone floor, his wounded shoulder screaming, his heart a block of ice. Camilla, Camilla, Camilla. He chanted her name like a prayer, a desperate, broken mantra. He reached her. She was in a heap at the base of the door, her eyes closed, her face pale as marble in the moonlight. No, 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 please, no, he begged, his rough hands stained with Ray's blood, hovering over her, afraid to touch her. Camilla, open your eyes, look at me. He saw it then, a dark stain, spreading on the stone floor beneath her, but it was not from her. He followed the trail. It was coming from him. He looked down. A new, searing pain had finally registered. A dark, wet patch was blooming on his own abdomen, just above his hip. He had been hit, in the chaos. In the moment he had lunged for the rifle. One of Servalos's men. One he had not even seen. Must have fired from the shadows. Boss, you're hit! Silas was there, hauling him to his feet. We have to go. The entire city heard this. We have to go. Her, Dominic choked, pointing. Get her. We're not leaving her. She's fine, boss, Marco said, appearing from the darkness, his face grim. She hit her head. She's unconscious, but she's breathing. She saved you, boss, Silas rumbled, pulling Dominic's good arm over his massive shoulders, taking his weight as Dominic's legs began to buckle. She wasn't supposed to be here. She must have followed us. She sent a warning to my private comm, just seconds before it all went down. What warning? Dominic gasped. The pain, a white-hot fire. A message, an intercept, Silas said, dragging him toward a side exit. She must have been listening, monitoring. She heard Harrison talking to Servalos on an open channel. She heard the real setup. She was screaming for you. His mind reeled. Ray, Harrison, Servalos, and Camilla. Always Camilla, running toward the fire. She had saved him. Again. They piled into the armored car, Marco at the wheel, Silas in the back with Dominic, laying him flat as Camilla was gently placed on the opposite bench. Dominic gritted his teeth, his hand clamped to the bleeding wound in his side. Not the penthouse, he growled. It's not safe. Harrison, Ray, they'll have men? Take me to the old safe house, the one in the tunnels. Boss, you need a doctor. You're bleeding out. Just drive, he commanded. He must have blacked out. The next thing he knew, he was on a cot in a damp concrete room, lit by a single bare bulb. It was an old maintenance room in the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the city, a place his father had used, forgotten by all but him. Dominic, wake up, please, wake up. Her voice. He forced his eyes open. Camilla was leaning over him, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her lips split. She must have hit the door hard. She was holding a fistful of gauze, pressing it hard against his side. The pain was excruciating. You're an idiot, she sobbed, her tears dripping onto his face. A stubborn, noble idiot. You came, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. I followed you, she said, her voice breaking. I put a tracker on you. I couldn't let you go. I hacked into the comms. I heard Ray talking to Servalos. He wasn't just working with him. He was La Colina. It was all him. He used Servalos to weaken you and was going to use you to kill Servalos and then take everything. I tried to warn you. You did. He grunted, grabbing her hand. Her knuckles were bloody, scraped raw from her fall. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing the raw, broken skin. You saved me. I almost lost you, she wept, pressing her forehead to his, her whole body shaking. You're bleeding. Oh, God, Dom, you're bleeding so much. Where are the others? Silas and Marco. They're gone. They said they had to clean up. They said they had to make sure the world knew Rico Servalos and Ray Cervelli died together. A failed coup. They said they'd meet us. Later, or never. They said to tell you, it's done. It's done. The words echoed in the small, damp room. The family, the business. It was all shattered, built on a lie, ended by a lie. Ray, his father's most trusted friend, his mentor. He was the mole, Dominic whispered, the betrayal a fresh, cold wound that hurt more than the bullet. All of it. He killed Antonio. He set up Vinny, all of it. Yes, she said, her voice quiet. And he's gone. They're all gone, Dom. Servalos? Dead. Silas? He made sure. Good. He closed his eyes, a profound, bone-deep weariness settling over him. It was over. The war was finally, brutally over. There's something else, she said, her voice hesitant. He opened his eyes. She was watching him, her expression something he could not read. When I was listening, she said, when I knew it was a trap, I did something. I didn't know if you'd make it out. I didn't know if I would. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let Ray, or what was left of Servalos' crew, just take over. What did you do, Camilla? I sent it, she whispered. The full ledger. Everything, my father's original files, the new drive you found, my decrypted routes, all of it. I sent it to a reporter I trust at the Times, and I sent an anonymous copy to the FBI's main server. He stared at her. They have it all, Dom, she said, her voice gaining strength. La Colina, Servalos, Harrison's offshore accounts, every dirty cop, every politician, it's all burning. As we speak, I listened on the way here. The feds are moving. They're making arrests. The Servalos family is being rounded up. Harrison was taken from his office. It's over. The entire infrastructure, gone, in one night. He looked at her. This woman who had been a ghost, a victim, a bookkeeper. This woman who had, with a few keystrokes, done what his father and his armies could not. She had ended the entire world. She had set them free. He started to laugh, a dry, painful, hacking sound that turned into a cough, fresh blood bubbling at his lips. Dom, she cried, terrified. It's over, he choked out, a strange, giddy lightness filling him. You crazy, beautiful. You burned it all to the ground. I did it for us, she said, her eyes fierce, so we could have what you said, a life, so we could walk away. Walk away, he repeated. It sounded like a foreign word. But the business, my men, Silas, Marco. They know, she said, her voice soft. Silas knew what I was going to do. He said, tell the boss it's time. He said, the family is a ghost now. He said, be free. Be free. Dominic looked at his hands, stained with his own blood. With Ray's, he thought of his father, he thought of Vinny, of Antonio, of a decade spent in a cold, lonely penthouse, a king on a throne of ice. Okay, he whispered, okay. A new, profound sense of purpose filled him, a last, final surge of adrenaline. Help me up. What? You can't move. You have a bullet in you. Help me up, Camilla, he insisted. Well, his voice the boss's. One last time. This isn't over. Not yet. She helped him to his feet, her small frame straining under his weight. He leaned against the concrete wall, his vision swimming. There's one last war, he gasped, his hand on the phone. The feds, they'll get the leadership, but the rot. The men who killed Antonio, the men who hunted you, they're still out there. The captains, the soldiers. What are you doing? She pleaded, seeing the cold fire back in his eyes. Dom, no, it's over. It's over when I say it's over. He growled. He made a call, then another. He was liquidating everything, his accounts, his properties, his assets, moving untraceable funds. We are purging them, he said, his voice flat and deadly. We are burning the connections. We are disappearing the business tonight. I am ending the Rossi family. For good. The next 48 hours were a blur of fire and blood. Dominic Rossi, a ghost himself, moved through the ruins of his empire. with Silas and Marco and a handful of loyal men who wanted out, who wanted to burn it all down with him. He waged a final, brutal, silent war. It was not a shootout. It was a cleansing. They hit a warehouse in Vernon, where La Colina's remaining captains were trying to regroup. To make sense of the chaos, it was not a fight, it was a judgment. Dominic. His side stitched and raw, his body fueled by painkillers and pure, unadulterated rage, moved through the warehouse like the monster Camilla had once called him. He found the men who had been on the rooftop, the ones who had killed Antonio. He did not kill them quickly. Silas and Marco met at dawn, at the edge of the River. The city's skyline choked in smog. They stood by a burning barrel, throwing in their phones, their ledgers, their pasts. "It's done, boss," Silas said, his voice quiet. He looked at the fire. "It's all ash." "And you?" Dominic asked, his face a grim mask in the firelight. "I'm going south," Silas said. "Maybe Mexico. Find a beach. Drink until I forget my name." He stuck out his massive hand. "You were a good boss. Dom, the best." Dominic shook his hand. "Be safe, brother." Silas nodded and walked away, a giant disappearing into the morning mist. "Marco?" Marco, leaning on a cane, his legs stiff, just smiled. "I'm tired, boss. I'm going back to Italy. I hear my cousin has a vineyard. I think I'll grow grapes." He, too, shook Dominic's hand. "Ciao, boss. Live a good life. You earned it." Dominic watched him go, and then he was alone, the king, with no kingdom, the boss with no family, just a ghost, standing by a fire, the sun rising on a city that no longer knew his name. He got in a nondescript car and drove north, away from the smoke, away from the blood, away from the name Dominic Rossi. The cabin was hidden deep in the forests of Oregon, a small, forgotten place by a lake that glittered like a sapphire. He had bought it under a false name years ago, a bolt hole he never thought he would use. Camilla was waiting. She'd been there for 3 days, terrified, pacing, listening to every car, every snapped twig, convinced he was dead, that he was never coming. When she heard the rumble of the car, she ran to the porch, her heart in her throat. He stumbled out of the car. He was not the man who had left. He was not the boss. He was not the king. He was just a man. He was covered in dirt, blood, and soot. He looked 20 years older, his face etched with a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. He saw her, and his face, the hard mask, it just broke. He took one step, then another, and then he collapsed, falling to his knees in the dirt. She ran to him, falling with him, her arms wrapping around his neck as he buried his face in her shoulder, his body shaking with the release of a lifetime of tension. He held on to her, his hands gripping her, his knuckles white, as if she were the only thing holding him to the earth. He did not make a sound, but she felt his tears, hot and wet, soaking her shirt. "It's over," he whispered, his voice thick and broken. It's over." "I know," she whispered back, her own tears falling, her hands in his hair. "I know, I've got you. You're home, Dom, I've got you." Weeks passed. The brilliant, violent green of the Oregon summer faded into the burnt gold and crimson of autumn. The world outside, the world of sirens and betrayals, it ceased to exist. It was a bad dream, a story they had once heard. They had new names. He was Adam. She was Eve. A new beginning. He was a different man. The ice in his veins was gone, replaced by a quiet, slow-moving calm. He chopped wood. He fixed the leaking roof. He started building furniture. His large, rough hands, which had only ever destroyed, now finding a new, quiet purpose in creation. He found he was good at it. He carved the wood, sanding it, staining it, his focus absolute. She worked at a small flower shop in the nearby town, a place that smelled of damp earth, lavender and roses. She learned the names of the flowers, arranged bouquets, and smiled at the customers. Her face soft, the lines of fear and tension gone. She was no longer a ghost. She was just a woman. They lived in a quiet, domestic peace that was more intimate, more profound than any of their desperate, passionate encounters in the city. They cooked together, they read by the fire. At night, he held her, his body a solid, warm shield against the nightmares that still sometimes came for them both. One afternoon, in late October, he was on the porch, sanding the arm of a new chair. The wood was smooth as silk under his hands. Camilla came out, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She stood beside him, watching him work. He smiled, a slow, easy smile that was new to his face, and reached for her hand. She took his, but instead of just holding it, she guided it. She placed his large, scarred hand on her belly, over the thin cotton of her dress. He froze, his own hand splayed against her, confused. What? She looked at him. Her eyes, those dark, beautiful eyes that had seen so much, now shining with a new, terrifying, brilliant light. "I think I'm late," she whispered. He stared at her. His hand was trembling. He looked from her face to his hand on her stomach and back to her face. Late. The word computed, the implications crashing into him, a wave of not fear, not anger, but a profound, unspoken, terrifying joy that hollowed out his chest. A child, a new life, not born of blood and betrayal, but of this, of them. He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. He did not speak. He cupped her face, his hands gentle, reverent. He saw his future, not a kingdom, not a legacy of fear, but this, a family. He kissed her, a long, slow, deep kiss that tasted of sawdust, lavender, and a lifetime of promises. It was a vow, more powerful than any he had ever made or broken. When he pulled back, he was stunned, dazed, reborn. He turned, still silent, and picked up his carving knife. He walked to the new wooden railing he had built for the porch, and there, in the smooth, golden wood, he began to carve. He carved her name, Camilla. He looked at the name, then at her, his heart so full he thought it might burst. He finally understood. It was all so clear. She may have called for me while dying, but loving her is what finally made me feel alive. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We poured our hearts into bringing Dominic and Camilla's journey to life, and we hope you enjoyed every moment of it. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Please, let us know where in the world you are listening from, and share your thoughts on the story in the comments below. What was your favorite part? How did the ending make you feel? Your support means everything to us. If you loved this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of danger, passion, and redemption. Thank you for being the best part of our community.